Read the headlines. The courts just ruled that bees can now be legally considered fish in California. Sushi will never be the same. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Food Theory, where if it walks like a bee and talks like a bee, it's probably a fish. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for yet another round of stupid food classifications! But this time, things are a little bit different. I mean, people have been debating whether a hot dog is a sandwich since man first placed a floppy tube of meat between two buns. But bees as fish? I don't think anyone's ever questioned whether those two got mixed up on the old taxonomic tree. And yet, here we are! The state of California's legally declared that bees, insects that don't swim, live in, or breathe water, are now legally considered fish by definition of law in the state. Remember that time we dedicated an entire episode to whether Subway tuna was actual tuna? Turns out it was bees the whole time.
No, not the bees! Not the bees!
For legal reasons, I should probably specify that Subway tuna is not actually bees. Okay, but seriously, what is actually going on here? I know those gnarly surfer bros over in California tend to do things a little bit differently, but seriously, do they take one too many trips to In-N-Out? Well, believe it or not, but this was actually a very real legal case with some very high stakes. And as you might imagine, the lawyers pulled out every trick in the book, making this the most absurd bee-related legal case to ever hit a courtroom.
What exactly is your relationship to that woman?
Are you her little bed bug? I'm gonna pincushion this guy.
Oh, I'm here! Oh, Lordy, I'm here! The venom! The venom is coursing through my veins! Oh, an angel of mercy will come forward to suck the poison from my healing buttocks.
Okay, I stand corrected. Most absurd bee-related legal case not involving Jerry Seinfeld. So today we're exposing the truth of this case, the secret conspiracies behind how foods get classified, and why it all matters to you. So let's get beesy, shall we? Now, if you've watched a few of our episodes about the legal versus technical definitions of food, you'll know that sometimes lawyers and judges keep legal definitions loose and springy to account for unforeseen future situations. That allows for policy and change to get affected quickly, despite the government historically moving at glacial speeds. But loose definitions also leave loopholes for creative lawyers to jump through. And boy, howdy did they start to get creative with this one. You see, back in 2018, several environmental and animal protection groups brought a petition to the California State Fish and Game Commission, asking them to add 4 specific subspecies of bumblebee to the list of officially protected animals under the California Endangered Species Act. Sounds easy enough, right? Especially since there are very specific criteria for determining whether or not a species qualifies for protected status. And wouldn't you know, the group came packing stats that back their petition up. For instance, one fact they cited was that Crotch's bumblebee lives in only 20% of its original historic range across the region, and is said to have declined 98% in relative abundance. I mean, that sounds pretty darn endangered to me. Assuming the facts check out, this should be a pretty easy decision, right? Well, not so fast. You see, the California Endangered Species Act, or CISA for short, is one of the most powerful individual state endangered species acts in the United States, because in an effort to protect animals and their habitats, it gives the government the power to impose severe restrictions on what private landowners can and can't do with their land. So this one case isn't just protecting animals, it's a decision that affects anyone and everyone who might be trying to buy, lease, build on, or use land and its resources. If a protected animal hangs out in your area or winds up deciding it wants to use your area, well, you are out of luck, my friend. Suddenly, the land that you own becomes useless because a bee needs to waggle on a nearby flower. And the more land you own, the more of a threat this sort of regulation becomes. Enter California's immensely powerful agriculture and farming industry, or more specifically, the combined forces of the Almond Alliance, the Cotton Ginners, the Association of Pest Control, the Citrus Mutual, and the Farm Bureau Federation, as well as a few others. Basically, it's an Avengers-level team-up of industry lobbying organizations, and they did not want the bumblebees officially classified as a threatened species. Why? Because doing so would likely increase limits on land use, pesticide use, and take all the investments that they've made in huge chunks of land and make those investments largely worthless. That means finding new land, spending more money, and at the end of the day, raising the cost of almonds for millions of people in the country who buy them, as well as the 3 people left who still eat Almond Joy candy bars. So in order to avoid this, they evoked one of food theory's favorite tactics, seeks a legal technicality, arguing before the courts that bees couldn't be listed as an endangered species, not because the data about their population or habitat status was wrong, but because the Endangered Species Act, as written and signed into law, is meant to protect, quote, bird, mammal, fish, amphibian, reptile, or plant. Notice something missing? Yep. Insects aren't mentioned anywhere in the text of CISA, nor are arachnids, crustaceans, millipedes, most invertebrates, really. But you get the idea. It doesn't exclude them, but it also doesn't make mention of them either. So that was the basis of the case. Hold on, you might be thinking to yourself, how could this not have come up before? After all, the California Endangered Species Act was enacted in 1970. We pull a lot of insect-adjacent invertebrates like lobsters, shrimp, crabs, and mollusks out of the water as seafood. So someone must have been concerned about an invertebrate at some point during the last 40 years, right? Well, yeah. In 1969, 1 year before CISA was enacted, California's separate Fish and Game Code Section 45 broadened the legal definition of fish to include, quote, wild fish, mollusk, crustacean, invertebrate, or amphibian. But in doing this, they actually legally opened up yet another magical technicality of the law. As written, the text of the code says that fish is defined as invertebrate, i.e. an animal without a spine. In other words, 97% of all living things on the planet. Based on the context, you can tell that it was meant to be aquatic invertebrate specifically, but that's not what it explicitly says. A loophole is a loophole after all, and bureaucracy is gonna bureaucracy. Based purely on what the letter of the California law technically says, the legal definition of fish can encompass anything without a backbone. Insects are invertebrates, bees are insects, therefore bees are fish, alongside its other fellow fishy friends like butterflies, earthworms, and spiders. So yeah, after some back and forth decisions on appeals between 2018 and now, bumblebees are officially fish in the state of California. There's no rule that says endangered fish can't live on the land.
Okay, well, sometimes science is more art than science, Morty. A lot of people don't get that.
And for as ridiculous as all of this is, funny enough, it isn't the first time some random food item's been intentionally miscategorized as something else to fit through certain legal loopholes. Ever wonder why people have historically been so confused about whether tomatoes are fruits or vegetables? Well, you have legal issues to thank for that one. In 1893, a grocer named John Nix wanted to avoid a tax on vegetables and argued that his tomatoes were fruit. He wasn't wrong either. A tomato is a ripened flower ovary that contains seeds. That is exactly what a fruit is. But the courts didn't care about that. Ultimately, they decided that the tomato was a vegetable and that John Nix needed to pay his taxes. There was also a time in the 17th century when the Catholic Church considered beavers to be fish. In the lead up to Easter, the Catholic Church discourages its members from eating meat on Fridays. But the Bishop of Quebec argued that beaver meat could be acceptable because it was such a good swimmer. Catholic Church was like, sounds good enough to me. And so the beaver became a fish and its meat was deemed acceptable for eating on Fridays during Lent. They actually did the same thing with the capybara as well. According to the church, this swimming rodent right here, also a fish. But of course, all these legal gymnastics started to take my brain into some weird areas. I wanted to take this absurd premise to its logical conclusion. Like, alright, if bees are legally qualified as fish now, that means that bee farms should technically have to pay the fees and pass many of the inspections associated with fish farms and fish hatcheries. That's weird, and I doubt anyone will actually enforce that, but if we're following the letter of the law, all bee apiaries are now doubling up as fish hatcheries. So that was bizarre realization number one. But what else can that possibly affect? Does that make bees seafood? Well, according to the letter of the law, the answer should be yes. According to the California Department of Public Health, Food and Drug Branch, any fish and fishery products are considered seafood, which again is just a bizarre quirk of the law. Now, bees as seafood doesn't mean all that much. We don't go around eating bees like we do salmon and tuna and sushi, so the comparison here is kind of silly, but then I noticed the term that they used in the legalese, fishery products. Things coming from fish and fish farms are also seafood. So would honey fall under that? Is honey now seafood? Yes it is. It's a fish byproduct, basically the bee equivalent of caviar. But perhaps most absurd of all is the fact that should you want to catch a bee, you would probably now need something like a fishing license. Don't worry though, you get one of those for the low cost of $58.58. Or, you know, you could always do catch catch and release of a bee. That said, of all the weird tangents that this research took me down, it was the Rent-A-Bee service that really caught me the most off guard. You heard that right, renting bees. Farmers will pay to have bees come over to their farms to help pollinate their crops. It's called paid pollination services, and it's becoming increasingly important to farming. Heck, there are even people named pollination brokers who act as go-betweens, whose job is to coordinate everything it takes to bring thousands of bees across state lines just so they can arrive right in time for pollination season. Why is something like this necessary? Well, exactly what we've been talking about here today. A lower population of certain types of bees coupled with a greater demand for certain types of crops that need greater pollination services. And wouldn't you know, but the most dependent industry on these bee rental services is none other than the almond growers of California. Yep, our dear friend from the legal case, the Hawkeye of the agricultural Avengers. He needs the bees more than anyone else. More than half of the US's total amount of honeybees, in fact. Between almond milk, butter, almond snacks, all of it, the demand for almonds has exploded. And California, the epicenter of our lawsuit, happens to be responsible for 100% of the US's almonds and 80% of all almonds grown worldwide. Yep, that's right. 80% of the world's almonds are coming from California, and there just aren't enough bees in California to sustain all those almonds. Which has me asking the question, why then are they part of this coalition looking to shut down bee protections in the first place? They'd rather just rent a bunch of bees? So I looked into it. Maybe these 4 subspecies of bee are just the wrong types of bee to be protecting. It's important to note that bees of the world come in many different shapes, sizes, and flavors, and not all of them are created equally. We love the fuzzy-wuzzy ones that produce all the honey that we get to steal from them, but there are other equally fuzzy-wuzzy varieties out there, including the bees in our conservation case, the bumblebees. Evidence shows that both honeybees and bumblebees can be excellent pollinators for almond groves, where growers are currently renting hives of bees to do their pollinating for a whopping $200 per hive. Considering that you need 2 to 3 hives for a single acre of pollination, and there are 1.3 million acres of almond orchards across California, it seems like it would be financially lucrative to work with conservationists to increase native bumblebee populations rather than, arguing in court over bees being the cousins of Flipper and Jaws. By increasing the native population of bees, they could cut down the cost of renting all those hives and presumably cut the cost of producing almonds in the process. But maybe bumblebees and honeybees don't work well together, or maybe bumblebees aren't as good at the job. Oh wait, no, that's not it either. In studies where both honeybee and native bumblebee populations work on the same almond orchards, the presence of native bumblebees actually encouraged honeybees to work harder, meaning that their own pollination is also more effective. And the trees that bumblebees pollinate, studies from other almond growing countries like Israel have shown, at least at a smaller scale, that bumblebee pollinated almond trees produce more fruit than a honeybee pollinated tree. So at the end of the day, the bees that almond growers are arguing against in this legal battle are bees that are fully capable of pollinating their own crops, maybe even better than the rent-a-bee populations they're importing to do the job now. Instead, if Big Almond worked with conservationists to develop longer-term strategies to increase native bumblebee populations by putting them to work on almond groves alongside their honeybee cousins, we might not end up with bees having to be classified as fish. On the other side, if conservationists are open to the idea that the best path for survival for some bee populations might be working with humans, now we might have ourselves some common ground on this type of issue in the future. Am I oversimplifying things somewhat for the sake of the discussion? Absolutely. Almonds in California are riddled with other issues that I'm not mentioning here today, like water usage, pesticides, lots of other pollinator populations, not just bees. The point here is that we shouldn't have to be doing this many legal gymnastics to find a solution. Scientifically and ecologically, there are solutions where everyone, including the bees, get a little of what they want. No fish required. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Bon appetit. But this story isn't the only buzzworthy thing happening right now. It's that special time of the year again, friends. It's the holidays. The time when all the relatives get together and someone assigns a holiday event to happen at your house. And even though you're like, ho, not a chance. That's actually my worst nightmare. Here they come, barreling towards the door, expecting to be fed. But instead of leaving the state, my friends, become the hero of the holiday this year with today's sponsor, HelloFresh. HelloFresh's festive eats are back this year, which allows you to have the holiday dinner of your dreams without without the time, money, or culinary degree that the recipes seem like they require to pull off. Truffle mashed potatoes, prime rib dinners. Wait, those are coming out of my kitchen? I'm the one proudly serving those home-cooked meals to Grandma during her yearly visit? Yes! Finally, I'll be able to do the family proud, rather than shaming them weekly with this whole YouTube gig. And I'm doing it thanks to Santa's little helper in the corner, HelloFresh. Auntie Lee will swoon when she thinks that you've stolen her honey butter barbecue pork chop recipe, but you didn't. You just had a box dropped off at your door and spent 25 minutes following HelloFresh's easy step-by-step instructions. HelloFresh costs less and is significantly healthier than takeout. It's also ready much sooner than delivery. That means that during a time when it's extra tempting to be overspending and overeating, you're making smart decisions that help your body and your wallet in the long run. We've been a HelloFresh partner for the entirety of 2022, and it's been one of the best decisions we've made to save time and money on dinners. No fad diets, no elaborate meal planning, just healthy, delicious, easy food delivered to your door that you can be proud that you made yourself. It feels so good to taste the final dish and know that I've made something that's that delicious. I actively feel myself get more confident in the kitchen with each and every box that gets delivered. And best of all, you start with 18 free meals plus free shipping when you sign up. All you have to do is go to HelloFresh.com and use the code FoodTheory18 for 18 free meals plus that free shipping. That is FoodTheory18 at HelloFresh.com, or click the link down in the description below. That way you get a bunch of free food that you can be proud of, and also keep a lot of free money that you've had in your pocket the whole time, and you can spend it on presents, and everyone's happy this holiday season. It is a win-win-win-win-win.